Nearly 8:15. Now, the Grenfell fire prompted a building safety crisis that's affected thousands of homeowners across the country, as we've reported. And it found that cladding on blocks of flats was a major fire risk, with many residents left facing huge repair costs through no fault of their own.
Now, many people on low incomes used affordable housing schemes like shared ownership to get on the property ladder. Now, though, there are calls to urgently reform those deals because all of the cladding costs are now the tenant's responsibility. Sarah Corker explains.
Who should pay to fix Britain's dangerous buildings? From London to Leeds, Birmingham to Manchester, more than 500,000 people are stuck living in unsafe, unsellable homes.
What work needs doing?
So if you look at all the timber cladding that you see, that all has to come down.
In South London, single mum Emma has outgrown this one-bed flat.
This is the living room, and
This doubles as your bedroom.
yeah.
And the
So
room for
in the evening, it's like changing rooms, and in here is my bed.
It was 12 months ago when we first met. Residents had just been told the building was so unsafe it needed round-the-clock fire wardens.
I'm angry. I'm actually furious at it. This is ruining people's lives.
A year on, Emma's share of the bill to remove the cladding and fix other fire safety faults could be up to £30,000. And the building doesn't qualify for any government funding because it's under 18 metres.
I'm on universal credit. Every penny literally counts. We're still facing high, huge, out of this universe type kind of bills.
And Emma only actually owns 50% of the flat. She bought through an affordable housing scheme, but terms of the lease mean she's liable for 100% of the costs.
What has the reality of shared ownership been for you?
I don't think shared ownership is fit for purpose. It's to help people like me who couldn't afford to get, a full mortgage on a property. So it's really done me a disservice. I wouldn't recommend anybody to go on the shared ownership.
Under shared ownership, you pay rent to a housing association on the part you don't own. Housing experts say the cladding crisis has exposed it's a flawed system and needs urgent reform.
I think the scheme does have a sort of fundamental unfairness. There are potential liabilities which are so great that people are potentially going to go bankrupt or lose their homes. Any scheme which purports to be an affordable housing and which can leave people in that situation is not doing its job.
Housing associations are now coming under greater scrutiny.
I've spoken to shared owners from across the country who are deeply unhappy with the way their housing associations are dealing with this. Poor communication, a lack of transparency over costs, and a refusal to share fire safety assessments and surveys are common complaints.
This is one of the worst affected.
The Conservative MP for Stevenage says leaseholders should not have to pay these huge bills, but warns housing associations are facing a tough choice between building safety and building new homes.
Some of the ones in London have said they're going to build 300,000 fewer homes over the next few years as a result of it. So not only is it really damaging the shared ownership market, it's also damaging the supply of affordable homes going forward.
Emma's housing association, Optivo, said safety is its #1 priority, and it's continuing to call for government funding to help cover costs on low and mid-rise blocks.
How has the way you feel about your home changed through all of this?
My mum died when I was 19, so the deposit for my flat essentially was inheritance. I actually was quite sensible and thought, yeah, I'm actually going to invest it and do something for my life and for my future. Fast forward to this now, I feel like it's probably been the worst thing that I've ever done is sign on a dotted line to get this property.
The government told us it's unacceptable leaseholders are facing these excessive bills, and further proposals to help will be set out soon. But until then, Emma and thousands of others are stuck living in homes they can't afford. Sarah Corker, BBC News in South London.
And Sarah's with us now. Morning, Sarah.
Morning.
There's a really stark kind of reality. You're a leaseholder, so you pay for what, 25, you own 25%, say, for example, quarter of your property. But you are responsible for 100% of the cladding costs. And you're just tied into the contract, and this is crippling.
That's right, and these schemes, as we've said, were designed to help people on low incomes to get onto the property ladder. So when it comes to shared ownership, often people own a minority share, but as we've heard there, they're liable for the full costs of maintenance. And when it comes to cladding, that can be the cost of, taking down an external wall, for example. I mean, huge bills. Emma there said it could cost her up to £30,000. But this is a legally binding contract. It's the terms of the lease that you're responsible for these costs. But when people signed up for the scheme, never in a million years would they have thought that they would face maintenance bills of this size. And I think that's what's at the heart of this crisis, is the financial unfairness of it all on people who can least afford it.
Which could go on for forever. I mean, couldn't it? I mean, the kind of bills we're talking about could hang over people's lives for decades. I mean, there are calls to reform the housing industry and to try and unpick this and make it fairer, but that's easier said than done, right? I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, and the government are doing a lot of things. I mean, the solutions to this, as you say, are not easy and they're not cheap. The government has said they've set aside £5 billion to remove cladding on the highest risk blocks, so that's over 18 metres. And so far, around 3,000 buildings have applied for that funding. Work has started on many blocks across the country, so that, of course, is good news. But if you look at the wider picture of all of this, MPs have actually estimated this is a £15 billion problem.
Because there are still a lot of buildings that aren't included in that initial scheme.
That's right. And Emma's building, because it's under 18 metres, it's not eligible for the government funding. So she is left thinking, well, how am I going to find this money? And the government, Michael Gove, the Housing Secretary, said last week that he feels it's unacceptable and unfair that leaseholders are facing these astronomical bills. And the government has repeatedly said that building owners, the industry, should take responsibility for making their buildings safe. But I think the issue is they're not perhaps stepping up in the way that government and leaseholders want them to. And at the heart of all of this is who is responsible for these faults, who should pay, and leaseholders are just stuck in the middle and say, look, we're stuck in this unsellable home and we're waiting.
Stuck. I mean, for somebody like Emma, she can't basically afford to move. She's trapped.
That's right, and what started, it's important to remember this, what started as an issue with cladding has become a much wider building safety crisis. It is an issue that seems to be spiralling because post-Grenfell, there were all these safety checks on other high-rise blocks, and they found not only problems with cladding, but things like defective insulation, flammable balconies, missing fire breaks, and it exposed problems with building regulations going back decades, and it's a massive issue, and people are trying to sort it out. And the Housing Secretary has said he's looking at these options, especially when it comes to those blocks under 18 metres, and we may hear more about those solutions in the weeks and months ahead.
And also, don't underestimate the psychological impact, the mental health impact it has on these people when you've got that weighing over you. I know you've looked into this loads, Sarah. We've spoken about this lots as well. Need to keep talking about it. Sarah's got a documentary. It's called Britain's Dangerous Buildings. Is My Home Safe? And you can watch that on the iPlayer. It goes on at 5 o'clock today.